Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today we have Matt Cook in the studio. Matt is a good friend, extremely smart individual with a fascinating set of skills. And we have invited Matt as a composer and as a person who knows about music on the deepest layer. As we know, music and ballroom dancing, they have a very powerful connection. And our goal today is to talk about both from a different perspective, perhaps than a perspective of a ballroom dancer, who is me today. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Yaro.
Thank you so much for finding time. It was kind of a short notice, but we made it happen.
My pleasure, bud. Anything for you and Lilia and Pro Dance LA, my favorite dance studio in all of Los Angeles. Gotta check it out if you haven't.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. The first question that I ask all our guests is, how would you introduce yourself? How do you see yourself?
Ooh, well, thank you. I would say I'm a storyteller at heart. So I love to tell stories with musical notes and words. So I write music, I write books, also sometimes tell stories with numbers as well. And there might even be a little bit of that today, telling stories with numbers. So we'll see. But yes, ultimately, storyteller. That's my calling.
Got you. Unexpected for me to be transparent. But I think the storyteller really can unite all of your skills. So I think that's, the way you described yourself is the best description.
That's the idea.
Lilia and I, we were fascinated by latest posts on social media that you put in terms of the music. And you've been talking there about music on a very deep level of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like a fabric of music, like a physics of music, right?
That's exactly right. It is the physics of music. It's been fun. I just started a 27-part series of little bites, just kind of bite-sized clips that are maybe 60 to 90 seconds each. Mm-hmm. So the whole series, even when you add it all up from front to back, it's not too long. And the series is called Understanding Music. And the first third of that is actually a good amount of it is dedicated to understanding the physics of music and trying to answer the question, why does music sound good to us? Because it's kind of it's an interesting mystery if you think about it. Universally, around the whole world, everybody listens to music and everybody pretty much universally loves music. There are also things that music around the world has in common. There are differences too. In particular, there are big differences between Eastern and Western music, but there are a lot of things in common. And remarkably, sometimes when you go to parts of the world that are very remote and not influenced by other parts of the world. For example, I was recently in remote Tanzania with a Maasai tribe and heard some parts of their music, which is not influenced by Western music in any significant way. But parts of their music actually had a lot in common with Western music, in particular, some of the intervals that they used match what we use. So there are some interesting physics at play, and we can get into that a little later if you'd like.
Yeah, it's already a lot to unfold
yes.
from what you have just said. I wanted to ask you a question. What brought you to music, especially from the position that you have, right?
Sure.
So you can be different things in music, right? You can be a performer strictly, you can be the one who writes things, you can be the one who actually makes things. I think you are more like from the creator's point of view, right?
Sure.
I'm sure you can sing very well. I'm
about to prove you wrong in that regard.
I haven't heard you singing, but I know that you play several musical instruments, right?
Well, two. That would be piano and the radio. So really only one. And as for singing, I did squeak into an a cappella group in college. I was never a very good singer. I think they just needed somebody who could do magic or something. But
Gotcha.
I squeaked in as a bass, but I was never really a singer. and am not very good. Playing piano is probably my
we agree that you are a composer.
That's right.
That's for sure.
That's right.
So what brought you into the role of composer?
Sure. Well, my introduction to music was at a very, very young age because I grew up in quite a musical household. I'm so grateful to have grown up in a house that was filled with music all the time from all kinds of genres. My dad would be working out in his garden and he would be playing classical music all the time, from Mozart to Dvorak, and he even set up some fun stuff for me. He set these trash barrels upside down and set up a rope swing so I could swing from one trash barrel to another to Dvorak's New World Symphony, the last movement in particular. So it was sort of deep in my blood at a very early age, learning to appreciate just the kind of passion that's in a lot of classical music. My mother would dance with me to ABBA, and she would sing "You Are My Sunshine" every night to me. So I also had a lot of more popular music as well. So just all across the genres, I had a very, very musical upbringing from both of my parents. Started playing piano at 6, had an extraordinary teacher, Marcus was his name, a German man, who became very quickly a very dear friend of our family. And he really inspired me in so many ways because he was not just a pianist and musician, he also explored so many other talents. Graphic design, he was a painter, just an extraordinary artist in so many ways. And he cultivated my ear. And so I owe him so much credit for doing that. Rather than forcing me to learn strictly by reading the notes on the page and sight reading, he found that, okay, well, this kid kind of learns better by hearing and playing back what he hears. So we did lots and lots of ear training, and ultimately that became one of the most valuable skills for composition. So
very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. I can see why you describe yourself as a storyteller, because I'm already immersed into the storytelling.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. I think you mentioned a few things that for me as a dancer are very interesting from your upbringing, right? And there is already a certain connection from your perspective as a musician to, let's say, my perspective as a dancer.
Yes.
When you said about the trash barrels, right? That you have to swing in order to make that noise, right?
That's right.
So there is a certain moment of physicality in order to make the sound, right?
Absolutely, yes.
You swing in and put in some physical effort and then resulting in the sound itself.
100%, yes. I think music and dance have so much in common, and I'm sure we're going to get into this in the conversation. They're partners, really. They're partners, and they work together in accomplishing similar things. So I think that music is really, you could describe it as a system of sound, and dance you could describe as a system of motion. I think that they're both storytelling techniques in a way. That music tells an emotional story. It conveys the artist, the composer's sense of life and sort of metaphysical value judgments, I think you could say, an artist's thoughts about how the world works at the deepest level. And dance does the same thing through motion. You also convey feelings of dreaminess or triumph or fiery passion. And not every type of dance can convey every type of emotion.
Sure.
For example, I don't think you could get the emotion that tango conveys through ballet, ever. I don't know if you could do that. Or vice versa. I don't think a tango could convey a lot of what ballet does. So there are different types of dances that offer different palettes.
Sure.
And music is much the very same way with its genres.
Yeah, very well said. Of course, there are different dances and different dance styles. Yes. And I think there is a cultural significance to every dance style, right? There is a different stylization to every dance style and the tradition. So that tradition really dictates the movement of a dance style itself.
Definitely.
One of the reasons why I mentioned the trash barrels, we're coming back to that.
Bring it back. Yeah. Trash barrels.
And I'm sure that you can unfold it in a different way, I mean, later on as our conversation goes on. I often talk to dancers, right? Or I engage in teaching dancers. And I've noticed that sometimes we as dancers, we don't understand that, like, we only think that the music is just going from the speaker and this is some kind of a virtual entity, you know?
Sure.
Especially right now, we have everything digital.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that the real music, the real orchestra is playing the competition. It happens, but not very often, unfortunately.
Sure.
So I always say to some of my students, you guys, when you hear, let's say, the guitar, right? Or when you hear the hornet or something like that, you need to understand that in order for that sound to come out of the hornet, somebody physically did an inhale, right? Really focused on the musical instrument, and then physically done the exhale, and then also like maneuvering the instrument itself. So it's a lot of physicality. So sometimes I often say to people, think about the pace of that guy who is playing the music, because physically you and him have to match. In order for the sound and your motion to match. So I think that physicality part in the digital era gets kind of diluted. We think it's it's a bytes on our phone or megabytes, right?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, brass players in particular, they're getting a workout as a piece goes along and they're playing. And in rehearsal, I mean, they can really get tired out.
They sweat.
Yes. There's a limit to how much they can actually do. With my own instrument, there's really no limit. It's the piano. It's not terribly exhausting to play. I mean, it can be, depending on the piece, right? I guess more emotionally exhausting, but not in the same level of workout that some of the brass players get.
I mean, if we transition the music conversation into physicality, I think the brass player would be more of a strength quality, where the piano would be more of agility.
Sure,
right?
exactly.
So you have to be very precise,
That's true.
very agile.
That's true, and you can get a lot of when it comes to the fine motor skills, the muscles involved, playing with even just a little bit of tension in your hand over time builds up. And so piano can become exhausting in that way, depending on what's being played. You know, it's not full body exhaustion, but you get a lot of tension, especially if that hasn't been trained out of you.
Coordination mentally takes a lot of power.
Yes. And I'm sure that happens too with dance, that if you haven't, and I don't know this exactly, so you can confirm or tell me I'm wrong, but the postures that you have often can entail quite a bit of tension in the body. And I'm sure you have to learn ways to handle that tension.
Oh,
because if you don't, then it can probably kill you after 30 minutes.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in dance, there is a good tension and a bad tension, right? We cannot achieve fully, performance without, let's say, any tension. So of course, some of the muscles, I'm talking about like contraction of the muscles, and extension and so on and so on. Of course, that's the goal. It comes from the alignment and other things. But yeah, tension is definitely one of the things we tackle. We try to work around, right?
Sure.
The less tension we have, the better. But I don't know. I'm not sure if zero tension is even achievable. Maybe if we even need it. There will be something.
It's definitely a similarity between what you're saying about tension in dance and in playing piano, and no doubt many other instruments as well.
We do have, as dancers, a lot of terminology that we use to teach motion from the music, right? Because of course, we don't want to ignore the music. We can't ignore the music. The music is playing, we're dancing to the music, right? In fact, if we talk about judging criteria, I think the easiest decision that the adjudicator can make if the couple is off time, right? So that's for sure no. That's an easy no. No matter how good you are. Yeah, if you're off time, you're off time. No one's gonna
dead in the water.
Mark.
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah. So some of the terminology I would love to have like your definition, even the most simple one, because again, for the dancers, sometimes we use things in respect of the motion, but we forget that those things are coming from the music side. And it's very useful and helpful for us to have a reference point in terms of the music, because originally coming from the music.
Well,
so I would like to, if you don't mind, like to name some of the definitions,
Sure,
right?
sure. So important concepts in music. Great question.
Yeah.
Let's start with harmony. Okay. So before we get quite into harmony, we'll give a little kind of introduction here with something that you know and that probably your whole audience knows. So the basic kind of fundamental basis for music is you got molecules of air jiggling, right, in a certain order, causing these propagating pressure waves. We call them a sound wave that makes your eardrum vibrate, right? So it's actually kind of amazing to me that all these jiggling molecules in the air can jiggle in just the right way to create what we hear as harmony and melody and all these other things. But it's important to start there and realize that everything that we hear in music emerges from sound waves, which are these propagating pressure waves through the air. And the waves have frequencies, right?
Yeah.
So they're counted in hertz. So if you can imagine, for example, a string, and you cause that string to vibrate, it vibrates at some frequency. It vibrates some number of times per second. Okay? So
this is what frequency is.
that's a frequency,
Gotcha.
right? And we call a particular frequency a pitch. So if it's vibrating a certain pitch, and we name those pitches. So harmony is, in its most basic kind of everyday terms, what you get when you hear two or more pitches that sound good together. That's basically what a harmony is. Is multiple notes played together, they sound good. At a deep level, why do they sound good? That's where it gets really interesting. So let's say you have some pitch, some frequency, right? Some number of vibrations per second. And let's say that you play that pitch. And then let's say you play another pitch where the frequency is twice the original pitch. Those two pitches, those two notes, are said to form a perfect octave. Okay, that's what an octave actually is. That's the definition. And if you hear the notes of an octave, doesn't matter what the octave is, whether it's a C or a D or an E, doesn't matter. They will always sound related. They will sound like the two notes. You recognize them as members of a family, almost like they're twins. That's the most incredible thing to me at a fundamental level. And it turns out, so that's a ratio of 2 to 1, right? So if you have one frequency and another that are in a ratio of 2 to 1, well, what if you take a ratio of 3 to 2? It turns out that those pitches, again, no matter what the starting pitch is, relative to each other, as long as they're 3 to 2, as long as the ratio of the frequencies is 3 to 2, those also sound like they're related. Not as immediately closely as an octave, but they still sound related. If I were a better singer, I would give you an example right now and sing them, but trust me on that, they actually sound really good to your ear. They sound consonant to your ear. And that is actually the start of what we call the harmonic series. So an octave is a harmony. If you take that interval created by a 3 to 2 ratio, that is a harmony. And it turns out, if you keep going up and have two notes in a ratio of 4 to 3, or 5 to 4, or 6 to 5, these actually all sound good to us, and they form the basis of the Western scale. The Western scale, it's only 12 notes, 12 notes for all the music, and they really come from these small integer ratios of frequencies. Pretty amazing stuff.
This is pretty amazing, yeah. You've seen some of the ballroom dance competitions. I remember you came to support me and Lilia a few times.
Right. Love
I
going.
appreciate that. If I'm a dancer, let's say, where do I look for the harmony that you have described? Do I need to listen to certain things? Like, where do I find it? Because we talk in dancing a lot about awareness of just general awareness of everything, right? We have to be aware of many things when we are dancing. Music is something we, again, have to be aware of.
Sure.
So if we want to look for that harmony in the music that is playing, where should our attention go so we can find it at least, or be on the right path? I'm talking more like practical application.
Sure, great question. So I think you're right to suggest that probably most people who listen to music are not thinking about the ratios of frequencies and that kind of thing. In fact, many musicians don't even know that an octave is an octave because you have twice the frequency. So you're certainly not quickly counting things up in your head, right? You're not counting, the number of vibrations or anything like that. You're just getting this overall feeling, this overall impression. And greater things emerge even from harmony, right? You have a lot of other kind of musical concepts that we can introduce. Timbre is one of them. Timbre is the quality that differentiates instruments from each other. It's the thing that makes your voice sound different from my voice, as we're talking right here. Even if we said the same word on the same pitch, you could still tell which of us is talking. That's because we have different timbres.
Or if we sing the same note, the timbre will define you and me.
That's right, exactly. So there are all kinds of concepts that sort of emerge from the sound wave and build up to kind of this high level of emergence where you get the emotional level. And so I think that without even having to key into harmonies or timbres and think consciously about those things, that a dancer probably keys into the very high level things. What story is the music telling? What feeling is conveyed at any particular part of a song or a piece? So I don't think that dancers necessarily are thinking about harmonies and timbres. I think melody is probably something that more advanced dancers should key into and think about. What is a melody trying to convey? What kinds of feelings? And then it's the artistry of the choreographers and the dancers to have the system of motion kind of work as a partner to that system of sound.
You started with this term, right, which is the harmony, and then you went into a few other terms.
Yes.
It was very interesting for me to kind of witness your chain of thoughts, because for us as dancers, we talk about harmony way later in our, let's say, dance education, right? Because we assume that, I mean, I would speak for myself, right? And my experience, like growing up as a dancer, it was assumed that I can't move.
Okay.
And then within time, when I start moving pretty good, then we say, okay, now you have a chance to be.
Is that true?
Be in harmony.
Early in your dance career, people told you that this guy can't move?
Well, it was not that bad, but what I'm trying to say is that
They said that about Fred Astaire, by the way. I think they told him that that guy can't dance. Right?
Really?
I think so.
Okay.
And Elvis, they told him, hang up your guitar, kid.
He proved them wrong.
You did.
Yeah, both of them.
Just like you did, too.
Yeah. But the thing is that for us to look simple and effortless actually requires a lot of effort and a lot of hard work and practice, right? So that's why, you can see a ballroom dancer that moves effortlessly. But then if you're trying to do those moves, then you really get to understand how difficult they are, even though they seem very simple, right? So then we talk about harmony way later in our dance education. Harmony with our partner, which, you described harmony within the notes, but I think that can be corresponded with the two bodies moving at the same time, in a way. Yeah, so we talk about harmony way later. And then for you started with the harmony, which is kind of, interesting, again, chain of thoughts, like the sequence that you have as a composer and we have as dancers.
And music isn't always taught that way. I mean, I think that students of music learn what harmony means early on, but they aren't necessarily taught about this harmonic series and the vibrations of the air molecules and ratios of frequencies and things like that. They don't necessarily learn that. They do usually start learning some music theory, but I actually like this way of music education. I like to start with the fundamentals of physics because it's interesting, it's exciting. It actually has a physical basis why we enjoy music, which is really kind of neat.
Do you think they should start with that? Like if you would have influence on the global music education, would you start that program with what you just said?
I would, I think I would.
You think that's like a ground level, like the basis work in order for musician to
I think
evolve?
it's easier to learn something when you have an idea of what's really going on. How do you really explain what's going on at a deeper level?
Sure.
So yes,
Why
I
the
would
weather
start
is
with
changing?
that. Yeah,
or is it seasons? Right?
exactly. So I would start with that because it gives some kind of clue as to what's the physical basis for all this and why are we enjoying this. If you just immediately start learning, well, this note is called a C and this is called a D, and I think a lot of musical education does go like that.
Yeah.
It's just, these are what these things are called, and this is what this note means on these lines, and this is what a treble clef is, and this is what a bass clef is. A lot of just sort of terminology. Oh, who cares what names of things are, right? It doesn't really matter. You could call them something else. It's good to have something we all agree on, but
Sure.
who really cares what these things are called? What's actually happening? Why are we able to universally, here in LA, all the way to a remote village in Tanzania, all appreciate the same sounds? Yeah.
This is amazing. Also, it's amazing that we have some really good songs from back in time, right? Like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and we still all agree that this is good.
Yes.
And we can still like re-listen and like enjoy it every time we're listening.
Yes.
This is a mystery, right? I mean, this is amazing. I'm a big fan of music in general. Like I have a wide spectrum of things that I listen. Yeah, so I really appreciate music a lot.
What's your favorite genre?
It's hard to say, you know. I like a lot of different music. Like I can appreciate classical music. At the same time, I can appreciate some of the like hip hop music, right? Which are way different from one another in terms of how they create it and just in general, the culture of it and stuff like that. I like rock music. For some reason, I really, really love a lot of musicians from the UK.
Oh,
yeah.
Excellent.
You know, if you think about it, there are so many talented people like over the years who came from that region.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, of course, I'm not professional. This is not my area of expertise, but everything like from rock to something like more popular.
Sure.
You know.
Well, it started with the British invasion, right? That's what they called it. It's the British invasion of music.
Yeah. So it's real. I mean, I'm just saying it because this is what really surprised me at one point because I'm like, oh, where is this artist? Where is he from? United Kingdom. This artist, UK. And it's going on and on and on. One of my favorite bands, Radiohead.
Oh,
They're also from England.
Are they? Okay, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and I think they have the most amazing sound, and they, as far as I read from them, you know, they revolutionized and they mixed rock with the electro music.
Sure.
In a very different way. They don't sound like anybody else. Yeah, but this is just, I mean,
the classic example would be the Beatles, of course, who just are incredible. I mean,
Elton John.
Elton John, certainly.
I mean, a lot.
Yes.
We can go on and on forever.
We could.
But every country, every culture has really amazing music. Yeah. So I think this is something that unites the whole world in this sense. You know?
It is.
And I think us as a dancer, we are very lucky we can dance to it. That's, you know, match 100%. Made in heaven, you know?
Absolutely.
Matt, I wanted to go on some like basic level for dancers that I feel sometimes we're lacking clarity in how we call things and what those things really mean.
Okay.
Right? So we have things like, for example, tempo.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
Also, we're dancing to a strict tempo. Like all our music traditionally is to a strict tempo. If we take the beginning of ballroom dancing, like from 100 years ago, actually also in England, right, originated, they are dancing to an orchestra with a strict tempo.
Yes.
What does that mean for you as a musician, as a composer? What is tempo? What is strict tempo? Can it be not strict?
Sure. So good question. So tempo, very simply, is the number of beats per minute. So as you listen to a piece of music, you can kind of clap your hands to it, or you can tap your foot to it. And really, it kind of comes down to how many times in a minute would you clap your hands or tap your foot.
Yeah.
That's the tempo. So I think what you mean by strict tempo for a piece of music would be that musical piece from the start to the finish has the exact same tempo going on at every moment in time.
Yeah.
And is all music like that? Absolutely not. So that is a constraint that I think helps dancers, having strict tempo, because if tempo changed on you and you're planning to do a dip or a twirl or something and you don't know that it's coming ahead of time, it's going to really throw off your game, right? So it's probably, even if you do know that it's coming, difficult to change tempo. I'm sure that pros like you could handle it, but it adds an extra layer of challenge. So strict tempo, I think, is a kind of compromise. It's a constraint that can help the marriage between music and dance. But when it comes to composition, I think most composers would tell you that they would not like to work within that constraint. Because it's nice to be able to just really emote, and sometimes you got something exciting coming and you want to accelerate. That would be called an accelerando, right? You're going faster, the music's getting faster, you know, something like that. Or you might have this calming sort of ballad-like thing going on, and you really want to just feel the dreaminess or feel the lightness. That could be something like Clair de Lune, right? A beautiful, beautiful ballad-like kind of piece. And sometimes it's nice to just be able to linger on a moment and slow down. So composers love to do that. They're telling emotional stories, and if they have to go at the same tempo from start to finish, you know, it creates constraints on the type of story you can tell.
Limits you.
There are certain types of music that work very well within that constraint. A march, for example, which I actually love writing marches. They're fun. And it's much easier to meet that constraint of strictness of tempo for a march. But even with that, right, it is nice to have a little bit of flexibility. And the marches that are kind of immediately coming to my head right now, the March of the Toys is one. Ba, 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 bum, ba, bum. Even right there, I accelerated as I was singing, and it made sense, or it would make sense if you listen to the actual piece and didn't have to hear my doggone singing.
No, it was very clear. As dancers, we are kind of stuck in this strict tempo. It's almost like a rule that we have to dance to the music with the strict tempo, right? And I understand that, as you said, we can predict the music better. And there are a lot of things involved when two people dance together, right? A lot of things to coordinate, so it makes our lives easier. But at the same time, I think one of the problems that we experience is that we are paying more attention to that strict tempo and to the rhythms than the actual melody, right? We're talking that, of course, on the very, very high level, there are dancers that are so good and so synchronized that they don't pay attention to rhythm anymore. It's automatic for them, they go for the melody. But you know that there are competitions of ballroom dancing, right? And then sometimes judges, they do have 2 seconds to make the decision if this couple is better than the other couple. So I've heard, I will never forget, it was about already like 12 years ago. I've been to one training camp. I was like very young amateur dancer, right? Not professional yet. And there was a professional couple having lesson with one famous teacher, ex-world champion. So she told the couple, the teacher, she says, you guys, when you're dancing alone in the studio and you're making this musical interpretation out of your dancing, I can appreciate that. And I would say, wow, this is really good, right? But then she says, if I judge you at a big competition and I have 2 seconds to mark you, then she says immediately in this short interval, in this like 2 bars, you went out, you were off time twice. Because you were too slow and then you catch up, you were too fast. But if I look at you at that moment, you're just catching up, which means you were late, you know?
That's tough. How do you handle that?
Exactly, exactly. So this is some constraint that we have with the strict tempo. We must be so clear, and so we look on time all the time. But at the same time, musicality is about being off time a little bit, you know, and just manipulating that rhythm. So this is our big struggle and the mission we need to accomplish as dancers on a very high level. What do you think about this?
Ooh, man. I mean, I don't know the answer of how to deal with that particular problem. Maybe it's just comes down to knowing when to borrow time. And it could be that during a competition, when the eyes of a judge may only be on you for 2 seconds, that's not the moment to borrow time. But if you're doing a sort of performance or an exposition, then when people can see you from start to finish, it makes sense to do that sort of borrowed time. So I guess that's what I would say, but I'm no dancer. You're the dancer.
Is tempo somehow related to the speed? The reason I'm asking that, because again, we are, from the dance standpoint, we are more about physicality of that motion, right? And that motion has some speed. So we make an assessment as an example. We have Viennese waltz, right? We say Viennese waltz is the fastest dance.
Right.
Which is true in terms of beats per minute.
Sure.
Tempo, but also because of that, it's true in terms of the ground speed. Like you are moving faster, right? Because you need to do like 180 steps per minute, basically, right?
Wait, is it faster than the quick step?
Yes, it is faster than the quick step.
In a linear direction or because of all the rotation?
It is faster as beats per minute, as a tempo, right? Yeah, I think rotation dilutes things, but for the quick step, there are moments fast, there are moments slow. Like at times, some piece of quick step, you can have ground speed faster than Viennese waltz.
Got it.
But as a consistent movement, as the weight changes,
I see.
Viennese waltz is the fastest out of all dances.
Okay.
So what is the relation for you, and is there relation in terms of the tempo and the speed, if you think about the ground speed of a person?
Wow. Well,
is there any?
To be completely honest, I don't know enough dance to answer that as far as it concerns ground speed of the dancer. But I would say that there is some flexibility between tempo and energy, overall energy.
Okay.
And I think that they probably do correlate, but you can have some wiggle room, right? You can have some pieces that have maybe a little bit less energy, even though they're a little bit quick on the tempo. And because that overall feeling of energy and excitement kind of comes from a lot of things. It's not just the tempo. It could be the particular ensemble of instruments that's playing. It could be the dynamics. It could be the, kind of the overall levels and volume. How big are we in this moment? So a lot of things contribute to the overall energy, I would say.
Gotcha.
And I don't know if that's a different concept probably than the ground speed of a dancer. But I would say that the energy of a piece is something that dancers do pick up on, and that energy probably contributes to ground speed, right? Or it's related somehow.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, everything is related.
Yes.
When you talk about energy, do you mean in any way, again, I think this term comes from the music, but also used in dancing, manner, right? So we have, for example, especially when dancers, they learn tango. So immediately they say, tango is sharp because it's staccato,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
Like, this is like a cliche almost, right?
Okay.
Now, in reality, you can be staccato, you can be legato, right? Which is more soft. And this is also part of tango. Then I know the other term that is coming from the music world into dancing, rubato, which is like a stealing, right?
Right, exactly.
When you,
stealing a little bit of time.
When you mentioned about the time and then the things like that. So those are all, please correct me if I'm wrong, I might be completely wrong with that. But as far as I know, those are all manners, right? So you can play the same tempo, and the same melody, but you can be staccato, you can be rubato, you can be legato, right?
Definitely.
Are there any other manners? Because in dancing, basically, we use only these three.
There are all kinds of things, anything you can imagine. And it's actually becoming sort of more acceptable to put into scores just plain English words of what you want. It used to be that pretty much everything was just rigidly in Italian. And the words that you're using, for example, staccato, rubato, legato, these are Italian words. But then people started getting a little bit more fun and free, and they'd put other types of words in there, like misterioso. But now you can just write in mysteriously if you want to.
I see.
So pretty much anything you want to convey, you can write it in.
So you can say, you play this piece of a piano mysteriously.
Yes.
And this is up to you as an player, as an artist.
That's
player,
right.
Can I say that word?
Sure. Yeah, player.
It's up to you how you understand that it should be mysterious. Right. So those are the manners.
And then you can also have, if you're playing in an orchestra, a conductor who kind of adds a layer of his or her own interpretation as well, and tries to specify, okay, what does mysteriously exactly mean?
For that conductor.
And that's the thing that players will often raise a hand and say, okay, I see that it says mysteriously, but what do you want me to do? What do you exactly want me to do? I love the point that you brought up about tango, by the way.
If you say staccato, everybody understands in music because that's kind of a term.
Universal, very specific about a technique. Exactly. I love a point that you brought up about tango and how it's sort of known to be very staccato with these sharp movements.
Yeah.
And maybe it's always sharp when it's danced. Maybe it's not. But immediately I sort of took the challenge in my head and I thought, okay, well, what's a tango, well-known tango that doesn't have that staccato feel? And one of probably my favorite tango of all time, Por una cabeza, which features in The Scent of a Woman, as well as in Schindler's List. I'm sure you know it.
Well-known music piece. Yeah.
It's not, if you think about it, it does have, I've heard it played with big staccato moments, but it also has these very legato, mellifluous moments too. Da, 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 da. And so I wonder, how would you dance a tango to a piece of music like that? Would you still keep the sharp movements, or would you be a little bit more flowing with it?
If you ask me personally, right, and I did express this opinion before some people, I don't know, follow the social media accounts or whatever we post with Lilia, I have a special relationship with the dance tango. I really find out how to dance it by myself. No one from the teachers, they were all really trying to help me. So it's not that the teachers were bad. But for me, it never clicked really, wherever they were telling me. Until I find out that tango is not only staccato. So it must be legato too.
Sure.
It can be rubato if you want it. Like tango for me is the full spectrum. You cannot be only staccato. Otherwise, also in terms of the movement, and staccato, like from the movement perspective, it's a sharp stop, right? You cannot be moving by doing sharp stops.
Sure.
If you're in motion, you're in motion.
Right.
If you want to stop the motion somewhere, here is the staccato part, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so I think tango is an extremely interesting dance in terms of how it can be portrayed. I was always going more for the soft approach for the tango.
Interesting.
When me and Lilia, when we were competing, one of the couples against us, their names are Rudy and Katya. They were extremely good in this dance, and they would normally always win this dance over us, right? So they had this very, very clear staccato approach, mainly, right? And they were brilliant in that approach. They were really good. But I always felt like, for my body type, like for my physicality, first of all, I cannot compete with these guys in staccato approach. They're better, in how they look when they're doing it. But I can keep some of that approach and do some legato approach, which was, for me as a dancer, that was very, fulfilling. Like, I was happy.
Yeah.
Most of the time, most of the times against that particular couple, we would not win. But it was fine for me, I was still happy with the...
You did what felt good,
with
right?
the performance.
You were proud of your performance.
But I can see that, other couples, of course, I don't want to go into results. Like, if you want to win and you really want to push for it, if that's what you want to do, you do it, right? But in general, I think tango is the dance. You are talking about the song that you have mentioned, right?
Yes.
If it sounds soft, you should dance soft. Somewhere you can then add sharp moves. Yeah, so tango is a very interesting dance. Another thing, and you mentioned march before, right?
Yes.
The marching.
Yes.
I also heard from some other teacher, they said, what ballroom dancers did to tango is a crime. Because now, with the strict tempo and with the clear beat all the time, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, it's just like a march, basically, So sometimes, again, we are taught, and I'm sure our viewers, they can relate, tango, staccato, and we're marching. So everything becomes, by the end of the song, you are
Well, I think that all we need to do to break that sort of pattern is have some wonderful dancers who are willing to not keep it so rigid, and also just find some composers who are willing to kind of break that mold too. So there's nothing that says that tango forevermore is going to be all staccato. We can bring it back, right?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
When we talk about the terms, right?
Yes.
There is a term that is being used, resonance, right? And I think you used in some of your series. We often say, as a performers, we have to resonate with an audience, right? Or with the room, like the overall atmosphere and mood and everything. But sounds like, again, correct me if I'm wrong, this term is coming from the music perspective too, right? Resonance.
Sure, it is.
What can be, do you think, the connection, if there is any, between, again, the musician and the dancer and this resonance? So dancer probably resonates to the music that is played, right?
Well, I think so. Resonate with can mean different things. If you're speaking strictly musically, I think of it more as a sonic term than a compositional term. You can think of the resonance of an instrument or the resonance of a room. It's kind of how an instrument sounds in a room. You can talk about the resonant frequency of an object. That is, that if you were to shoot sound waves at it, what is the frequency that you'd need to shoot at it that will kind of make it vibrate? And so that's what it means, I think, in a strictly sonic sense of the word. But then, of course, there's the more figurative definition of the word, which has to do with, you would say, oh, I really resonate with that idea, or I really resonate with that person, or we as a dance couple, you and your partner, resonate with the music. And I think that implies some kind of alignment or synchrony.
Gotcha.
Working together with.
We're just using it figuratively rather than literally.
I think so.
Right?
That's right.
Sounds like that.
Yes.
I would like just to come back a little bit to the strict tempo topic, right? And the tradition that we have in ballroom dancing. And I am curious about your opinion as an outside person looking at dancers with a music background, right? So we do have this strict tempo. Sometimes, and I think this is a true statement, that there is a stronger beats and the weaker beats, right? If we listen to the music.
That's right.
Sometimes we have situations like that dancers are trying to phrase their routine to match exactly the strong beats. Like they have certain move that is considered more powerful, they're going for it on a strong beat. Now, in the competition settings, right, we don't know what music is playing. We don't know the situation on the floor because the couples might be on the way, you might need to wait a little bit and things like that. What do you think if you see the situation where the dancer could have moved and danced in motion, but they are counting those strong beats and weak beats in order to start certain move? Like I'm dancing to the music, there is some interruption, then I'm about to go, but then I'm like, okay, no, that's the weak beat. 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I'm going to the music. What do you think about that? Because we have
good question.
Different opinions in the dance world.
Sure. Well, I am not a professional dancer, so it's take this with a grain of salt.
Sure.
It creates, to me at least, the impression when someone does that and looks like they're counting beats. It creates the same impression it does when a dancer looks at his or her feet to make sure that they're not getting all tangled up, right? It suddenly you are reminded that person is thinking about how they're coming across, and you know that they're conscious about dancing and they're conscious of their own performance. It's sort of like if you're watching a movie and you get the feeling that someone's acting, right? It sort of takes you out of the movie for a moment.
Well said.
So, and brilliant dancers, just like brilliant actors, when you're watching a movie, the best actors, you forget that you're even watching a movie because you're in that story with them. So I guess when you see a dancer kind of moving their lips, subtly counting 1, 2, 3 or something like that, it sort of takes you out of the performance a little bit.
Thank you, Matt. This is very well said. Another statement that we have in ballroom dancing, right? If we talk about musicality, basically everything narrows down to 2 approaches. And sometimes the third approach is a mix of those two, I would say. To be in tune with the music, right? Some people say, you are the slave of the music. And then some dancers say, music is my slave.
Okay, they really say it? They use that language? Okay.
Yeah. And I heard it from knowledgeable people, right? Like both statements. And it's always to a point that you're thinking, oh my God, I like both of the teachers, but they have such a different approach.
Ideas.
What do I do?
Okay.
I have an answer for myself, right? But again, when you hear those kind of approaches coming from dancers and they relate to your craft, which is music, what is your instant reaction to this kind of statement?
Oh, well, absolutely. Dance is the slave to music. Come on, it's obvious. No, I'm only joking. I wouldn't use that language at all, frankly. I think that it's a false dichotomy, really. I don't think it's either or, because what I would say probably more precisely is that they're partners, and they behave differently, right? They behave very differently. So, music can be enjoyed independently. You can just listen to music. Yeah. I don't think the same is true of dancing, and some might disagree. But if you can do dance, you can listen to music without dance. Yeah. But I don't really think that you can appreciate the full richness of a dance without music. Yeah. And I do believe that there are some who would disagree with sort of kind of modern dance and things like that, but I really think they need to be paired together for dance to have its full impact. The other thing is that dance, when it comes to the other art of choreography, it's not just executing the moves, but choreographing moves for a performance. Yeah. The music has to come first, right? You need to pick what is the track you're going to use and then decide to pick your moves to that track. Sure. So in that sense, music comes first. The choice of music comes first, and the choreographic choices are with respect to the music. But I wouldn't ever say that means that music dance is the slave to the music. Yeah. I would just say that they're partners, but one of them you can appreciate on its own, whereas the other depends on the other. So I would say that there is a dependence that dance has on music that music does not have on dance, but they work well together as partners. So that's kind of how I would put it. And what would you say? So you had an opinion on the matter too.
Yeah, just before saying it, I wanted to mention that we do have a teacher that is very influential right now as an organizer and the judge. He is in his, I don't know exactly the age, but let's say 70 plus, like older generation. He always says that music is my first partner, and my partner is my wife is my second partner. I see. You know, I see. So I think that really corresponds a lot with what you just mentioned. Right?
I like that phrasing a lot, actually. To think of the partner of the couple is the music, right? And each member of the couple should think of the music as this other partner, perhaps equally important, if not more important, than the dance partner.
If you want to know my opinion on that matter, in terms of slave or not slave, right?
Yes, please.
I think musicality is something very hard to achieve in a competitive ballroom dance world. If you're doing a show and you know already which musical piece will be played, it's easier, right? Plus, you're not being compared to another people at the same time on the floor. When you have a competition setting, you have other couples, you have a music that is playing you have no control over. Sometimes you don't like the music that is playing. So it's very hard to spark emotion within yourself if, like, objectively that waltz is not good. You just don't like the song, you know? Or you think it's an appropriate kind of tune for that particular dance.
Sure.
So musicality, I would say, if I need to have like a short answer, I think you have to be both. I think you have to be a slave because you have no control over the music, but at the same time you need to make the music a slave at some point of your dance routine. You know, start with a strict tempo, following the rhythm, but then do your best to follow the melody, right? So I think the melody is our tool how we can get into this musicality.
Yes.
Because if we only focused on rhythms, we just become very predictable, right? We can predict, like you said in the beginning of this interview, what's going to be in the future, but perfectly on time means perfectly predictable, perfectly boring, right? So yeah, we have a very difficult task, I think, as competitive ballroom dancers to be both at the same time. This is the challenge.
Well, judging music, judging dance and music to begin with is very different, right? Because it's such a subjective kind of thing. And the judges have so little time to scan the floor. I mean, you said 2 seconds. I believe it, because sometimes you have many, many couples out there and it's only a minute of dancing. So if you do the math, each couple only gets a few seconds.
Sometimes 2 seconds, yeah.
Wow.
This is from real conversations with like real people who are adjudicating. Matt, what do you feel about this circumstance that we can kind of predict the tune in the music, just like in general, you know? Do you think this is something that exists for the people who listen to the music? Because that prediction is something we spoke with you about. If dancers can predict a little bit the music, right, the tune, they can also probably be more prepared with their motion, with their dancing. Is there anything like that? Like you guys as a composers, for example, are you concerned about people that they can predict a little bit what's like some maybe pose or acceleration or something else?
Sure. This is a very deep question, actually, probably deeper than you realized. It's a very, very good question. So I would say this. To some degree, when you write something, I think it's very good to write thematically. So that means that I like to write music, and I think that, frankly, good music has this. Good music is driven by themes. Themes are melodies that are treated and featured and spotlighted in the music in such a way that the musical composition conveys to the listener, this melody is the important melody. This is the most important kind of centerpiece. And then you can have other types of thematic material like it that are not quite as high in stature as a theme. We would call that a motif. So a motif could be some little bit, it could be a little rhythm, it could be just a few notes, not quite important enough to be called a theme. So the idea of a theme is that it creates this feeling of familiarity with the listener. So you hear it once, and because it's so important, you're probably going to hear it again,
it's brought back.
Again. It's brought back. Not exactly the same way, and it's really wonderful when composers will sort of tweak a theme here and there. Oh, now we're hearing it this way. This normally bright theme is actually now it's dark. You know, now it's ominous. So
like Vivaldi, Four Seasons, right?
Yes.
There is certain theme that is being brought back over and over again, so you can relate to it.
With different treatments, exactly. So does this create some kind of predictability? Well, yes. If you've heard a theme before, you've heard a melodic theme before, you kind of know what's coming. But that's okay, because the feeling of familiarity is good, and you are being shown by the music, okay, this is important. This is an important sort of character in the story.
Yeah.
So that's a type of predictability that I would say is good, because it's not about the predictability as much as it is the familiarity. If you haven't heard something before and you absolutely know what the next note is going to be, that's not necessarily a problem either, because sometimes the music just calls for something. You know, I could play a series of notes for you. I could even sing, you know, a few notes for you, and I would make a bet that you'd be able to sing the next note, just because that's sort of what the music demands. So that kind of predictability isn't necessarily a bad thing either. But there is a third kind that sort of equates to a piece just being boring, if that's happening all the time. You want to have surprises, right?
Like
you want music,
monotone.
Exactly,
kind of, yeah.
Exactly. So you want to be surprised, and I would say that if a piece is so predictable that it lacks variety, then it's a problem. So variety to me is actually the most important ingredient of storytelling in music. It creates the change, the sense of purpose that you're going somewhere. To me, that's key. So predictability can be a perfectly fine thing. It's a bad thing if it's getting in the way of variety in a piece.
Gotcha.
So that's probably a longer answer than you bargained for, but
no, it's a great answer. And ultimately, when I teach, especially professional couples, right, who have really capability to have full range of motion and everything, I always tell them that from the technique standpoint, this is just a variety of things, of tools that you have to use on your own behalf. I will not be there performing for you guys, you know.
Yes.
I give you all of these tools. You might mix and match it in a completely different way, even better than I expected. In fact, my hope is that they will be mixed better than I expected, you know, in the ways that I cannot even foresee. So variety is something really, really important in dancing as well. Because of course, dancer without variety of tools to execute the movement is a very predictable, boring dancer. You know, and he or she they do just over and over the same thing again.
I'm sure that a lot of your students, when you're teaching them the basic step for something early on, and you just really want them to master that basic step, they say, really, is this all there is? But I see you dancing and I can't see a single basic in there. Are there basics? Are you doing them? So it certainly is, I'm sure it's something that gets learned as you go.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Matt, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Yarrow. Great to be here.
I think it was great. So many topics where music and dance, they correspond, right?
Absolutely.
I absolutely agree with you on the matter that probably dancer need music much more than music needs dancer, right? I don't think we can dance as a ballroom dancers without music. Maybe as a form of an exercise, yes, but we need music so much.
Yes, well, there's a marriage between them, a partnership between them, and I think ultimately what they both do is convey the sense of life of the artist either being the composer or the dancer. And they do it in different ways, as we discussed. It's either that system of sound or the system of motion, but in partnership, it's dynamite. It can be really beautiful.
Thank you so much
for having me, Yarrow. Great talking with you.
Really appreciate, and looking forward to release this interview to the world.
And I'm just excited to be here at ProDance LA with you, Yarrow.
Thank you so much
for having me.
Thank you.